This one's supposed to be a tutorial for CEOR-zero, which is basically a giant breakthrough in CEOR theory. First of all, sorry I don't have a YouTube setup, and I haven't really prepared for this video. I'm going to do it impromptu on the go. So I have a scramble. The thing that I'm going to do first is go through an example solve so that you can understand what CEOR is and what CEOR-zero does. And then I'll go a little bit more in depth into teaching how to do CEOR-zero with YruRU-d, which is like the tracing method that I use. So the scramble is here. It will also be in the description. This is a scramble. So the good thing about CEOR-zero is you are going to reduce the entire cube to be able so that you are able to solve it using first only LU moves. And once you're done with your LU moves, you can solve the rest of the cube with RU moves. So that's how you're going to reduce the entire cube. This has a lot of benefits, mainly in OH solving, because you can do all of the LU moves by simply doing a Z move, convert them to RU, and then doing a Z prime, and then do the rest of the RU solve. Now, the first step is inspection. Inspection is a pretty big step here. Even though it won't take a lot of time, it is a pretty important step. One more thing that I forgot to mention is you are going to do that reduction in 0 moves, which is why the name CEOR-zero, and that's the fascinating part. All you have to do is hold the cube in an orientation where it's already reduced into a state where it can be solved first using LU, then using RU. Right. So the first thing in inspection you're going to do is look for any blocks that you can find on the cube. That way you'll be able to decide what first block you're going to do. In this case, there are no blocks, so you can just default to any first block that you want. In my case, I'm just going to choose the orange first block with white on bottom. That keeps green in front, which I think most of the people are familiar with. So that will include this corner, and 3 more edges and a center. The first step after figuring out which first block you want to do is to identify the corner that will end up in DBL. So you'll put your first block on the left side, obviously, and when you put it on the left side, one of the corners is going to end up in DBL. You have to find out which corner that is. So in this case, because I'm going to do the orange first block, it's going to be this corner. So I just have to put this corner in DBL by rotating the cube, because remember, it's still the inspection that is going on. So I put it in DBL. Now I can put it this way. I can rotate the cube, as in twist the cube while keeping it here. Now it's no longer oriented correctly, but we don't care about the orientation. We only want the corner to be in DBL. I can twist it once more. So there are 3 orientations that are allowable. So yeah, the orientation that I've chosen in the solution that I've put on the screen and should also be there in the description is this orientation where the DBL corner is in the correct place. It's just twisted incorrectly. The second step, the step after that, is to do something called corner permutation tracing, CP tracing. Now you can use any method that you want for CP tracing. I use YruRU for CP tracing because I feel that's the fastest. I will put a link in the description for a tutorial for YruRU CP tracing. And if you have absolutely no idea what it is, for the purpose of the example solve, you don't need to care about what it means. Just remember that after you have put the DBL corner in DBL, once you perform the tracing is going to output something called a swap corner. Basically, it's going to point out to one of these 6 corners, and that's all that CP tracing does. So in this case, let's say I performed CP tracing, and after performing CP tracing, it turned out the swap corner is this one, the one that is sitting in UBR right now. So the second step, we're still in inspection. The second step is to put the swap corner, which in this case is this, in DBR position, right? You have to again do so by rotating the cube, because obviously you are in inspection, you cannot perform moves. So you can do it by X or an X to Y prime. I will do an X to Y prime. There are a few very simple rules on how you can rotate the cube in this step, but we'll get to that when we'll talk about the tutorial in depth. Okay, so the first step was to identify a first block and put the DBL corner in DBL, irrespective of the orientation. The second step was to identify the swap corner and put the swap corner in DBR. And we are done. Now the entirety of the cube is going to be like you're going to be able to solve the entirety of the cube using first a set of LU moves, and once you're done with the first block, using a set of RU moves. By the way, when I say LU moves and RU moves, I mean LU, L wide and U wide, and when I say RU moves, I mean R wide and U. At all points in time, all of the slice moves are allowed. You'll typically never need them, but it's just an option to be able to use them. They could be useful in EO, or maybe they could be useful while doing first block if you want to do something funky. Anyway, so now I have the swap corner in DBR. There is one more tiny step that you'll have to do if you're doing OH. You'll have to do a Z move. The reason you'll do the Z move is because all of the initial steps are LU, so you need to convert them to RU. Now you just have to perform the solution. So in this case, I'm first going to form a square with these three pieces. I'm going to do that with U prime R U2 R, that forms the square. Now these two pieces will form the next pair using U2, and now I just have to attach these guys. I can do that using R2 U prime, R2 U R prime. So the first block is ready. I just have to put it on the left side. I can do it using U prime and Z. I don't have to do the U prime, I can just rotate it like this, but that's awkward for one-handed. So I'll just do a U prime and then Z prime. And now the rest of the solve is very straightforward. The next step is to do EO plus solve these two edges and have all of the centers oriented properly. In this case, we have 6 bad edges, like 6 misoriented edges, 4 of these, and these 2. So yeah. I can solve it using R2 R U prime R. What that did was reduce the number of edges from 6 to 4. So now I have 4 bad edges. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I can place all of these in something called a staircase. You don't need to worry about it if you don't know what it is. And I'll do it in a slightly different way than conventional, because that will help me solve the bottom 2 edges while solving the EO. This is usually something you'll always be able to do even when you're speed solving. After that, it's simple F2L. So F2L in this case, I'll just put this edge here, and then I'll just solve these two to form this pair. I can then solve this edge using an algorithm like that. And now we have last layer. Luckily, we have already solved edge orientation and we have already solved corner implementation. So there are only 84 remaining cases. Those cases are known as 2GLLs. All of them are extremely simple to learn. Very short. I think the average is, I don't even remember what the average is, but it's definitely much less than 15. And yeah, there are two gen. So again, it's only going to be RU. So this one is pretty simple. It's back soon cancelled into a soon, and U prime to solve the entire cube. Again, you might have seen that in the entire solve, we just did one rotation, and even that was Z prime, which is basically the fastest rotation that you can do one-handed. And the entirety of the solve was RU moves, absolutely nothing else. And that is great because in a method like CEOR, obviously you're rotating a lot and it is pretty move count heavy. And you can spam moves in CFOP, but obviously the rotations are going to slow you down. In this case, you can spam moves in basically every single step. You might have a tiny pause when you are recognizing EO, but you can sort of cancel that out with the Z prime that you're going to do while moving from first block to EO. Everything else is extremely spammable. Compared to RU first block will be slightly more efficient, maybe by, let's say, 1 move, because in RU you are allowed to use F moves also while making the first block, while in this case you can only use RU moves. But I think the speed is going to be more or less the same, because even though the length of the first block is going to be like 15% longer, the execution speed is going to be much better in CEOR, maybe 15% better even. So the first block speed may not matter as much, like the first block higher move count may not matter as much, and in the rest of the solve it's just RU. In RU, the problem is that for CLL or CMLL you will have to use a couple of F moves or maybe a D move, and for the finish it's MU, which is maybe just slightly but definitely slower than RU turning. And the move count for RU and CEOR is reasonably similar. I would say if RU is 48, then COR is 52. And COR move counts are they fluctuate a lot, they're skewed a lot in the negative direction. So very often you will have solves that are much shorter than even 40 moves. That's because there are a lot of steps that have the potential to skip. Anyway, now I'll just talk about the magic that happens during inspection. In the meantime, I'll just scramble the cube and so this is the same scramble as here and as in the description. So the first step is once again very clear. You have to identify a first block that you want to do. It could be the one that's most blocky or the one that can pair pieces like in one move or something like that. Identify the corner that belongs in the DBL of that first block. So in this case it will be this, because we're doing the orange block with white bottom, and put it in DBL. Doesn't matter what the orientation is. Once you've put in DBL, the only thing that you have to make sure is that the DFL corner is not the other corner of the first block. So in this case, the DFL corner should not be white, green, or white, blue, orange, which in this case it isn't. But if it were, then you can just twist the cube while keeping the DBL corner in place. The second step is to do something called tracing, CP tracing. Here is the YruRU website. You can just type YruRU in Google and hopefully this website will pop up for you. In that, there's the CP line section in which you can go to advanced tracing, and there is an explanation of this. A much better resource is the YouTube video that I'm gonna link in the description. But the overall idea is you have to find out where the other two corners that go in the bottom are. So in this case, it'll be this corner and this corner. And that way you'll be able to identify which case this is. So in this case, this is the letter V with an arm. Don't need to worry about what that is. You can care about it after you learn what the CP tracing method is. But all you have to do is, because the two corners that belong in D phase that are not a part of your front first block are here, you have to look at the other four corners in a certain order, in this case in this order, and you have to identify the CP case that it is. In this case, the CP case will tell you that the swap corner is the corner sitting over here. It's fairly quick to do, but it might have a bit of a learning curve. So definitely go look at the CP tutorial. Once you've identified the swap corner, what you have to do is put the swap corner in DBR. Now, the way to do that is you can either use X rotations or you can use X to Y rotations. What that means is, if this is your swap corner, oh, just a second, never mind that. If this was your swap corner, then you can bring it to DBR using an X2. If this was your swap corner, then you can bring it to DBR using an X prime. If this was your swap corner, then you don't need to care because it's already in DBR, so this step in inspection is skipped. If this was your swap corner, then what you'll have to do is, first you'll have to do an X2 and then you have to do a Y move, so in this case it will be a Y. If this was your swap corner, then you will have to do an X2 and then a Y2 to bring it in DBR. And if this was your swap corner, as is the case for us right now, then you can either do an X or you can do an X to Y prime. Both of them work because it fits both of those descriptions. It can be an X star rotation or an X to Y star rotation, where star can be anything. It could be Y or Y to Y prime or nothing. Yeah. Once you do that, you're done. You can just solve the rest of the cube using LU moves and then RU moves. Now, if this sounds too good to be true, there are a few extremely small caveats to this. So this method does not work every time. It works in 75% of the cases with 0 moves. In the remaining 25% of cases, that's 1 on every 4 scrambles, you will have to do one move to reduce the cube into the LU then RU state. So there are 2 special cases that you can have. So if you know what YruRU tracing is, or even if you don't, once you do the CP tracing, you'll end up with one of these 6 corners. Now there is a 1 in 6 chance that the swap corner comes out to be the corner that belongs here itself. So in this case, it could so happen that the swap corner is this, which actually is the corner that belongs in the first block itself. This is also something we called solved CP. If that happens, the thing that you'll have to do, if such a thing happens, is you will have to do an R or a U move from this orientation, from the orientation where the DBL corner is still in DBL. You'll have to do either an R move or a U move such that your corner, the other corner that belongs in the first block, ends up either in DBR or in UBL. The reason you have to do that is, let's suppose that we took this to be the swap corner and we brought it to DBR just as we would typically. Then once you do this and try to solve the first block using LU moves, what will happen is the corner that belongs in the first block is stuck over here in DBR, and there is no L or U move or a slice move that you can do to bring this corner out of DBR, so you'll never be able to solve the first block. So yeah, if you get a solved CP, if your swap corner is the same as the corner that belongs in DFL, then instead of rotating the cube such that the first block corner goes in DBR, what you have to do is this special case where you can either do RU moves to bring this corner all the way to UBL. Once you bring it to UBL, you do an X prime and a Y2. Of course, you can do all of this in inspection itself. What you'll have to do is you'll have to know which move to do to bring it into UBL, and then you can do those turns. Or in this case, the more appropriate thing to do would be to bring this into DBR using an R or U move. So that can be only done in one move. To bring this here would require two moves, but this is only one move. So we'll do an R prime, then a Y prime, and then a reduction is done. Now, of course, you cannot make moves in inspection. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to imagine that you did an R prime, then you do the rotation, and you'll have to know what the move you did was. So in this case, the move that you did was an R prime, which when you rotate becomes a B prime. So after you start the timer, the first move that you have to do, would be a B prime, and then you can do the LU moves and then the RU moves. So that is the solved CP special case. Again, the solved CP will happen once in every 6 solves, and out of those solves, 1/3 of the time your corner will already be in one of these two spots, so you won't need to worry. In the other 2/3 of the solves, when the corner is here, you'll either have to do a U or an R. In this case, you can do an R2 or U2, it's your choice. I don't know, depends on what makes blocks better. So that was special case number 1. If you have special case number 2, let's assume that this is still the swap corner, and you have to do a rotation to bring this to DBR. Ideally, you would want to do an X rotation because it's like pretty simple. So you will do an X rotation and try to solve the rest of the first block using LU moves. In this case, it won't work. The reason it won't work is because the corner that belongs in the first block ends up getting trapped in DFR instead of special case 1 was when it was trapped in DBR. Now it is trapped in DFR. Again, you cannot do any LU or slice moves to be able to bring this out of DFR. So the thing that you do is, instead of rotating using an X, you will rotate it using X2 Y prime. As you might remember, there are two types of rotations that you can do to bring a swap corner into DBR. It could be an X star, so an X prime, X2 or a nothing rotation, or an X2Y star, that is an X2Y, X2Y prime, X2Y2 or X2 nothing. The special case over here, the special case for this swap corner is that 2 of those rotations make sense. An X also makes sense and an X2Y prime also makes sense. So in this case, if an X made your corner end up here, I think, yeah, if your X made your FB corner end up here in DFR, then what you'll have to do, just a second, I'll just fix this. Yeah, if your X made your front block corner end up over here, then what you'll do is an x to y prime, and what that will do is place the swap corner once again in DBR, but this time your DFR will no longer be the first block corner. So that's good. Now the problem occurs in not this case, but if the swap corner was somewhere here. If the swap corner was somewhere here, what may happen is when you put that swap corner into DBR using a rotation, it might drag the other first block corner, the first block corner that is not in DBL, the first block corner that belongs in DFL. It might drag it to DFR, and that is a problem. So you will have to do one move. Yeah, I think this is a good example. Okay, so let's suppose that this was your swap corner. If this was your swap corner, what you would have to bring it to DBR would be an x2, y2. But if you did that, the first block corner would end up in DFR. This is something you don't want. And so what you would do in such a case is you would do either an R or a U move in this orientation where DBL is still in DBL. In this orientation, you would do either an U or an R move to bring the swap corner into UBR. So you would do a U in this case. What that will do is it will give you two options to be able to bring the swap corner into DBR. Then you can choose the rotation. In this case, if you do an x2 y prime, that won't work, but an x will work because the other FB corner will not end up in DFR. So yeah, one of the rotations will obviously always work. Again, you cannot make moves during inspection, so you'll just have to imagine that you made this move, you did an X, so that would be equivalent to doing a B move in the orientation after the X. And so now you'll start your solve with a B, and then you'll do LU moves, and then you'll do RU moves. I think I made this extremely slow and extremely much longer than I should have made it, but I think I've covered every single thing in like extreme detail other than what CP tracing is. So for CP tracing, please have a look at the tutorial in the description. The scramble and the solution are going to be in the description. And if you have any doubts or need some help with CP tracing or with YruRU-d or with CEOR-zero, then you can join the Discord server for CEOR, which is the invite link to which is also in the description. That's it.